My name is Grady Thompson, 67 years old and retired contractor. After 4 decades of building homes for others, I never imagined my own son would steal mine while I fought pneumonia in the hospital for 14 days. When I returned home, weak but alive, strangers opened my door. My son Jason stood behind them, saying words that cut deeper than any saw. "It is not yours anymore. Do not come back." I simply smiled and replied, "Enjoy it." Little did they know what I had prepared for them. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had someone betray your trust. I spent 43 years as a contractor, building custom homes across 3 counties. It was honest work that let me create something permanent with my hands. When Eleanor and I decided to build our dream home 25 years ago, I poured everything I knew into those walls. Every nail, every board, every fixture was selected and placed by me. The hardwood floors were hand-finished. The kitchen cabinets were custom-built in my workshop. The stone fireplace featured river rocks I had collected over decades. This wasn't just a house, it was my legacy. Eleanor and I shared 42 beautiful years before cancer took her 3 years ago. She fought hard for 18 months, but in the end, even her incredible strength wasn't enough. Those first months alone in our house were the hardest of my life. The silence was deafening. I would find myself talking to her empty chair, setting 2 plates at dinner, and reaching across the bed in the morning only to find cold sheets. Our son Jason had always been the center of our world. Eleanor and I waited 7 years to have a child, so when he finally arrived, he was our miracle. I taught him everything I knew about construction, hoping he'd join the family business. Instead, he pursued marketing and moved to the city. I was disappointed but supported his choice. After all, a man has to follow his own path. 8 years ago, Jason married Samantha after a whirlwind 6-month romance. Eleanor had her concerns about the match, saying Samantha seemed more interested in Jason's potential income than in Jason himself. I dismissed these worries as mother-hen protectiveness. Now I wish I had paid more attention. The first few years of their marriage, everything seemed fine. They would visit for Sunday dinners, and Samantha would compliment the house, asking detailed questions about its value and the neighborhood. After Eleanor passed, the dynamic shifted. Samantha began making suggestions about my life. Perhaps the house was too big for one person. Perhaps I should consider downsizing. Perhaps I could help them with a down payment on a bigger place for themselves. Then about a year ago, Samantha's parents, Harold and Patricia, lost their home to foreclosure. From what Jason told me, they had refinanced multiple times to fund various business ventures and luxury purchases. When the payments became impossible, they simply stopped making them. "Dad, they need help," Jason said during one of his increasingly rare visits. "They have nowhere to go." I offered to lend them money for a rental deposit, but Jason seemed disappointed by my response. "They need more than that," he said. "They need family support." Over the next several months, Jason approached me repeatedly for financial assistance for his in-laws. I helped where I could, dipping into my retirement savings more than was wise. Each time, the gratitude seemed to diminish, while the expectation grew. Winter in our region is always challenging, but this year was particularly brutal. I had always been healthy, rarely even catching a cold, so when I developed a persistent cough in January, I ignored it. Even when the fever started, I just took some over-the-counter medication and pushed through. Big mistake. One morning, I got up to make coffee and felt the room spinning. I remember grabbing for the counter and missing. Next thing I knew, I was on the kitchen floor, unable to catch my breath or call for help. Thank goodness for Thomas, my neighbor of 20 years. He had noticed I hadn't brought in my trash cans and came to check. Finding my door unlocked, another habit Eleanor always scolded me for, he entered and found me semi-conscious on the kitchen floor. "Hang on, Grady," was the last thing I heard before waking up in the hospital with tubes in my arms and an oxygen mask on my face. The doctor later told me I had severe pneumonia that had progressed to the point where my oxygen levels were dangerously low. If your neighbor hadn't found you when he did, she said gravely, we might be having a very different conversation. I had never considered my own mortality so directly before. Even during Eleanor's illness, I had been focused on her comfort, her needs, her battle. Now, alone in that sterile hospital room, I confronted my own fragility for the first time. The first few days in the hospital passed in a blur of medication, tests, and fitful sleep. The pneumonia had progressed significantly, and my body was working overtime just to breathe. The doctors explained, I had bacterial pneumonia affecting both lungs, complicated by my age and the delay in seeking treatment. Your body is fighting hard, Mr. Thompson, Dr. Rivera said, studying my chart. But this is going to take time. We are looking at a minimum of 2 weeks here. 2 weeks seemed like forever. I worried about the house sitting empty, bills that needed paying, and most of all, being alone in this sterile environment. Jason visited that first evening after they had stabilized me. He seemed genuinely concerned, holding my hand like he used to when he was a little boy afraid of the dark. The doctors say you will be okay, Dad. But it was close, he said, his voice catching. Samantha stood behind him, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up with what appeared to be concern. The house, I managed to say between labored breaths, needs someone to check on it. Jason nodded quickly. Of course, Dad. I will take care of everything. Do you have a spare key? I directed him to the hidden key in my wallet, explaining about the plants that needed watering and the thermostat settings. In my weakened state, I was grateful to have someone I could rely on. Someone I trusted completely. For the next few days, the fever kept me drifting between consciousness and a strange, dreamlike state where past and present mingled freely. I would see Eleanor sitting in the hospital chair, young and beautiful as the day we met, only to blink and find a nurse adjusting my IV. By the end of the first week, the antibiotics had begun to take effect, and I was more lucid. Jason and Samantha visited every couple of days. Their visits grew shorter, often just 15 or 20 minutes before one of them would look at their watch and mention a meeting or appointment. During one of these visits, Jason brought a folder of papers. Just some hospital billing stuff they need you to sign, Dad, he explained, holding a pen out to me. Insurance forms and consent for treatment. Nothing to worry about. My vision was still blurry without my reading glasses, which had been left at home in my rush to the hospital. The medication made it hard to focus, but I trusted my son. I signed where he indicated, about 4 or 5 documents in all. Samantha's parents are helping out at the house, Jason mentioned casually as he tucked the signed papers away. Just keeping an eye on things, watering the plants, bringing in the mail. Hope that's okay. I nodded gratefully. Tell them thanks, I said, not giving it much thought. I was just relieved the house was being looked after. As the second week of my hospitalization began, I noticed something curious. A nurse named Angela seemed to watch my interactions with Jason and Samantha with a furrowed brow. After they left one day, she lingered in my room, checking my vitals with unusual thoroughness. Your son seems busy, she commented neutrally. Hess got a lot on his plate, I defended automatically. Important job in marketing. Long hours. Angela nodded noncommittally. And those papers he had you sign the other day? That was for the hospital? Something in her tone made me pause. Yes, billing and insurance stuff. Why? She adjusted my pillows, taking her time before responding. It's just that hospital billing forms are usually provided by us, not brought in by family. And they have our letterhead. A faint uneasiness settled in my stomach, but I dismissed it. He probably got them from the billing office directly. Hess just trying to help. Angela gave me a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm sure you're right, Mr. Thompson. Just make sure you know what you're signing, okay? Even when it comes from family. I appreciated her concern, but felt a flash of irritation too. Of course I could trust Jason. He was my son. The remainder of my hospital stay followed a similar pattern. My health improved steadily but slowly. Jason and Samantha's visits became briefer and less frequent. When they did visit, they spent much of the time on their phones or stepping out for calls. Several times I heard Jason's voice rising in what sounded like excitement from the hallway. "It's perfect," I overheard once, as he passed my partially open door. "They won't know what hit them." I assumed he was discussing some marketing campaign for work. By day 12, Dr. Rivera was pleased with my progress. "Your lungs are clearing nicely, Mr. Thompson," she said after listening to my chest. "If this continues, we can discuss discharge in a couple of days. You'll still need rest at home, of course, and a follow-up appointment next week." The prospect of going home lifted my spirits tremendously. I tried calling Jason to share the good news, but the call went to voicemail. I tried again that evening and the next morning with the same result. Angela noticed my frustration. "Everything okay?" "Just trying to reach my son about going home soon. He must be busy." She nodded and hesitated before speaking. "Do you have anyone else who could help with your discharge? A friend or neighbor, perhaps?" I thought of Thomas, my neighbor, who had found me. "I suppose I could call Thomas if I can't reach Jason." "That might be wise," Angela said. "Sometimes it's good to have a backup plan." By the morning of day 14, Dr. Rivera signed my discharge papers. Despite multiple attempts, I still hadn't reached Jason. Growing increasingly concerned, I called Thomas, who immediately agreed to pick me up. "No need to keep trying, Jason," I told Angela as she helped me gather my few belongings. "My neighbor is coming. I am sure Jason is just wrapped up with work." Angela squeezed my hand slightly. "You take care of yourself, Mr. Thompson, and remember what I said about being careful, okay?" I nodded, appreciating her concern but still not fully understanding it. As Thomas helped me into his car, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. 2 weeks in the hospital had drained me, but I was going home. To my house, the house I had built with my own 2 hands for Eleanor and me. The thought of my own bed, my own kitchen, my own space filled me with comfort. Little did I know what awaited me there. The taxi ride home from the hospital was both exhausting and exhilarating. Thomas had offered to drive me himself, but he had an important doctor appointment he couldn't miss. "He'll check on you this evening," he promised as he helped arrange the taxi. Even sitting upright in the back seat of the cab took more energy than I expected. 2 weeks of lying in a hospital bed had weakened me considerably, and the pneumonia had taken a significant toll on my stamina. Still, I felt a surge of excitement as we turned onto Maple Street, where I'd lived for over 2 decades. The driver, a chatty man named Carl, kept the conversation light. "Nothing better than getting back to your own place. Am I right? Hospital food will make you sicker than whatever put you there in the first place." I laughed politely, though it triggered a small coughing fit. As we approached my house, I felt a strange sense of dissonance. Something looked different, but in my fatigued state, I couldn't immediately identify what. "That one there, the blue 2-story with the stone path," I directed Carl as we neared. He pulled into the driveway, and that's when I noticed the unfamiliar vehicles parked there. A red SUV, I'd never seen before, and a luxury sedan that certainly wasn't mine. For a moment, I wondered if he had taken me to the wrong house. "Are you sure this is it?" Carl asked, noticing my confusion. I nodded slowly, eyes fixed on my home. "Yes, this is definitely my house." Through the front windows, I could see different curtains than the ones Eleanor had picked out years ago. The garden decorations were different too. The wooden birdhouses I'd crafted had been replaced by mass-produced garden gnomes. Carl helped me with my small bag and made sure I was steady on my feet before accepting payment and driving away. I stood in my own driveway, feeling like an intruder. With increasing apprehension, I approached my front door and knocked, a surreal action to take at one's own home. After a long moment, the door swung open. A woman in her early 60s with artificially blonde hair and too much makeup stared at me with obvious shock. I recognized her immediately. Patricia, Samantha's mother. "Grady!" she exclaimed, her hand flying to her throat. "We weren't expecting you." "Obviously," I replied, still trying to process why my in-laws were in my house. "I'm looking for Jason. Is he here?" Patricia shook her head, her discomfort evident. "No, he's at work." Samantha, too. She reluctantly stepped aside to let me enter. Walking into my own living room was like entering a parallel universe. My comfortable leather sofa and recliner had been replaced by a floral print sectional I would never have chosen. The walls, once adorned with family photos and Eleanor's watercolors, now displayed generic artwork and photos of people I barely knew. My handcrafted coffee table was gone, replaced by a glass and chrome monstrosity that looked like it came from a department store. "What is going on here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where are my things?" Harold, Samantha's father, emerged from the kitchen holding a sandwich. He froze upon seeing me, his expression shifting from surprise to something close to guilt. "Grady," he managed, placing the sandwich down. "We thought you were still in the hospital." "Clearly," I said, fighting to stay calm. "Would someone please explain why you are in my house and where my belongings are?" Patricia and Harold exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Jason said it was fine for us to stay here," Patricia offered weakly. "After we lost our place, he said you wanted to help." "Did he?" I replied, my suspicion growing by the second. "And did he also say you could remove all of my possessions and redecorate?" Harold cleared his throat. "Look, Grady, there seems to be some confusion. Maybe we should call Jason and Samantha to sort this out. They can explain everything better than we can." "Please do," I said, sinking into an unfamiliar chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. While Patricia made the call, I looked around, trying to locate anything familiar. In the corner, I spotted a stack of boxes labeled Grady's stuff. My stomach clenched. Those boxes couldn't possibly contain a lifetime of possessions. "They are on their way," Patricia announced, her voice falsely bright. "Should only be about 20 minutes. Can I get you something to drink? Water? Tea?" "I would like water from my own kitchen, thank you," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. While waiting for Jason and Samantha, I noticed Thomas watching from across the street. Even from this distance, I could see the concern on his face. I gave him a small wave to indicate I was okay, though nothing could have been further from the truth. Jason and Samantha arrived in record time, both looking tense and exchanging glances that spoke volumes. My son, who I had always been able to read like a book, was visibly nervous, running his hand through his hair the way he did when preparing to present a difficult case. "Dad," he exclaimed with forced cheer. "You are out of the hospital. Why didn't you call to let us know?" "I did," I replied evenly. "Multiple times. You didn't answer." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Samantha stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm that I resisted the urge to shake off. "Grady, we are so glad you're feeling better. We were all so worried." "Were you?" I asked, looking directly at her. "So worried that you moved your parents into my home and packed my possessions into boxes while I was fighting for my life." Jason and Samantha exchanged another look, some unspoken communication passing between them. From across the street, Thomas continued to observe, now standing on his porch with arms crossed. I could feel something was very wrong, more wrong than I had initially thought, and I was about to find out just how deep this betrayal went. The tension in the room was palpable as Jason, Samantha, and her parents all exchanged nervous glances. I sat in the unfamiliar chair, waiting for an explanation that would somehow make sense of this bizarre scenario. But deep down, I was beginning to suspect there was no innocent explanation. "Dad," Jason began, his marketing voice in full effect, the same tone he used when trying to sell someone something they didn't need. "While you were in the hospital, we made some decisions to help everyone out. It was all very above board." "Above board?" I repeated. "Removing me from my own home without my knowledge seems the opposite of above board." Jason straightened his shoulders and walked to a drawer in what used to be my desk. He pulled out a folder similar to the one Head brought to the hospital. "Actually, Dad, it was all legal. See, we have the paperwork right here." He handed me several documents, and even without my reading glasses, I recognized my own signature at the bottom of each page. As I squinted to read the content, my blood ran cold. "This is a deed transfer?" I asked, disbelief evident in my voice. Samantha stepped forward, her expression a mask of false concern. "Grady, Don't you remember? You were so generous. You decided to give Jason and me the house since it was too much for you to maintain alone. You said you'd be happier in a retirement community. I never said any such thing, I replied, my voice hardening. I never agreed to give away the home I built with my own hands. But you signed the papers, Harold interjected, pointing to my signature. Right there, clear as day. I stared at the documents, recalling Jason's hospital visit with the billing forms. Angela's warning echoed in my mind. Just make sure you know what you're signing. I had been too trusting, too weak, too medicated to question my own son. You tricked me, I said quietly, looking directly at Jason. You brought these to the hospital when I was ill, when I couldn't read properly without my glasses, when I trusted you to be honest with me. Dad, you're confused, Jason replied smoothly. The pneumonia and the medications have affected your memory. This was all discussed and agreed upon. The doctors said you might experience some confusion after your illness. I looked from Jason to Samantha to her parents, all wearing similar expressions of rehearsed concern. They had planned this, all of them, taking advantage of my illness to steal my home. I want my house back, I stated firmly. Whatever I signed was under false pretenses. I was incapacitated and misled. Jason's expression changed then, the facade of concern dropping away to reveal something harder, colder. Dad, legally, this isn't your house anymore. It's ours. We own it now. And what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? I asked, still struggling to process the magnitude of this betrayal. Samantha stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. We've looked into some lovely retirement communities. There's one just 30 minutes from here with activities and care staff. It would be perfect for someone in your condition. My condition? I repeated. My condition is that I've been robbed by my own family. Don't be dramatic, Dad, Jason said dismissively. We're just trying to do what's best for everyone. Samantha's parents needed a place after their foreclosure, and this house was too big for you anyway. It's a win-win. I looked around at what had once been my sanctuary, the home where Eleanor and I had built our life together, where Wed raised our son, where Id mourned her passing. Every corner held memories that these people were now casually erasing. I want my house back, I repeated, my voice stronger. Jason's expression hardened further. He stood up, towering over me in my seated position. It's not yours anymore. Don't come back here again. We've been patient because you're my father, but legally, you're trespassing right now. The words hit me like physical blows. My own son, my only child, was treating me like an unwanted stranger. Jason, I said, my voice breaking slightly, I'm your father, and I'm grateful for all you've done, he replied mechanically. But things change. People move on. You need more care than I can provide in my busy life. The retirement community is the best solution. Patricia approached with a small suitcase. We packed some of your clothes and personal items, she said, not meeting my eyes. Just the essentials. The rest we can sort through later. I looked at the small suitcase, supposedly containing the essentials from my life. 67 years reduced to a single bag. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I was being discarded by the people I had trusted most. Where am I supposed to go right now? I asked, hating the vulnerability in my voice. Samantha shrugged. A hotel? Until we can get you set up at Sunny Pines, we can drop you at the Holiday Inn if you need a ride. I stood up slowly, my body still weak from pneumonia, but my resolve strengthening with every passing second. These people had calculated everything, waiting until I was at my most vulnerable to strike. They had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, but they had made one critical mistake. They assumed I would simply accept it. I took the small suitcase from Patricia's hand. I see, I said quietly. Then, summoning every ounce of self-control, I managed a slight smile. Enjoy it. What? Jason asked, clearly confused by my calm response. The house, I clarified. Enjoy it while you can. I turned and walked toward the door. My movements slow but deliberate. Behind me, I could hear them whispering, likely relieved at how easily I had capitulated. "Dad," Jason called as I reached the door. "It's for the best. You'll see that eventually." I didn't respond. I simply walked out the door of the home it built, down the path it laid stone by stone, past the garden Eleanor and I had planted together. Across the street, Thomas started toward me, concern evident on his face, but I gave him a small hand signal to wait. I needed to sit alone for a moment, to process, to plan, because while Jason, Samantha, and her parents might think they had won, they had no idea what was coming, no idea at all. I made it as far as the small park at the end of our block before my legs gave out. The physical exertion of walking even that short distance after 2 weeks in a hospital bed had depleted my limited energy. I sank onto a bench, the small suitcase at my feet, and tried to gather my thoughts. My home was gone. My son had betrayed me. I had nowhere to go and limited funds immediately available, as my wallet and credit cards were still in the house. The reality of my situation threatened to overwhelm me, but beneath the shock and hurt, something else was building. A determination I hadn't felt since the days when I fought to build my construction business from nothing. I might be down, but I wasn't out. Not by a long shot. First, I needed a place to stay and access to funds. I pulled out my old flip phone, thankfully still in my jacket pocket, and called the one person I knew would help without question. "Frank? It's Grady. I hate to ask, but I need a favor." Frank Douglas had been my business partner for 20 years before we both retired. We had weathered recessions, difficult clients, and countless challenges together. Within 15 minutes of my call, his pickup truck pulled up beside the park. "Jesus, Grady," he said, taking in my hospital pallor and the small suitcase. "You look like hell. What happened?" During the drive to his house, I explained everything. Frank's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as I described Jason's deception. "That little snake," he muttered. "After everything you've done for him, I need a place to stay for a while," I admitted. "Just until I figure things out." "You don't even need to ask," Frank replied firmly. "Our guest room is yours for as long as you need it. Barbara will be furious when she hears what happened. She always thought Samantha was bad news." Frank's wife Barbara was indeed furious, but her anger was directed entirely at Jason and Samantha, not at me. She immediately set about making up the guest room and preparing a proper meal, insisting I needed to regain my strength. "First things first," Frank said once I was settled. "We need to get you some cash and a credit card. Do you have accounts Jason doesn't know about?" Fortunately, I did. While most of my money was in accounts Jason knew about, I had maintained a separate savings account at a local credit union, my rainy day fund that Eleanor had always insisted upon. Jason had no access to it, and I doubted he even remembered its existence. The next morning, Barbara drove me to the credit union where I withdrew enough cash for immediate needs and ordered a replacement debit card. I also began making calls to my old network in the construction industry. Milton at the title company confirmed my suspicions. Jason had been inquiring about the value of my property months before my hospitalization. "He said you were considering downsizing," Milton told me. Asked about market values and how quickly a sale could go through. Similarly, Roy at Westside Realty reported that Jason and Samantha had consulted him about listing the house. "They said you were looking to move to assisted living," Roy said, embarrassment evident in his voice. If he'd known it wasn't true. Each call revealed another piece of the puzzle, another element of their premeditation. This wasn't an opportunistic decision made when I fell ill. This was a calculated plan they had been developing for months. 3 days after being ejected from my own home, I made an appointment with Diane Lawson, an attorney who specialized in elder law. Years ago, Id renovated her office building, taking particular care with the historical elements she wanted preserved. She remembered me immediately. "Mr. Thompson," she said warmly, gripping my hand, "your restoration work still gets compliments every day." I laid out my situation, providing the documents Jason had tricked me into signing. Diane reviewed them carefully, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "This is troubling," she said, setting down the papers. But I see several problems with these documents. First, you signed them while under medical care, potentially with diminished capacity due to medications and illness. Second, there appears to be no consideration given in exchange for the property transfer. Third, the documents themselves contain several procedural errors. So I have a case? I asked hopefully. More than a case, Diane replied, a determined gleam in her eye. What Jason did potentially constitutes elder abuse, which carries serious legal consequences, and I'm willing to take this on personally. Consider it repayment for the beautiful craftsmanship you put into my offices. With Diane working on the legal front, I turned my attention to gathering more information. Frank helped me hire a private investigator to document who was living in my house and any changes they were making to the property. Meanwhile, I contacted my old construction buddy Leo to do a casual drive-by inspection of the house. They are making changes already, Leo reported back, and fast, sloppy ones. I've seen a plumbing van, electricians, and a painting crew going in and out. No permits posted, which is required for that kind of work. This news both distressed and encouraged me. While it pained me to think of my carefully crafted home being modified by hasty, substandard work, it also presented another angle for reclaiming my property. The most significant breakthrough came when I remembered a special provision in the original deed. When I built the house, I had included a unique clause that the property would revert to a trust in Eleanor's name if certain conditions weren't met. Jason didn't know about this clause, as the legal details had bored him when I tried to explain our estate planning years ago. I shared this information with Diane, who immediately requested the original deed from the county records office. "This could be exactly what we need," she said, excitement in her voice. "If this clause exists as you describe, it could invalidate the entire transfer regardless of what you signed in the hospital." For the first time since finding strangers in my home, I felt a surge of hope. I had spent my life building things to last, paying attention to details others might overlook. Now those same skills were providing me with a way to fight back. As Frank drove me back to his house that evening, he glanced over with a smile. "You know, Grady, I almost feel sorry for Jason and those vultures." "Why is that?" I asked. "Because they have no idea who they're dealing with. They see an old man they can push around. They don't see Grady Thompson, the man who built his business from scratch and never took shortcuts. The man who always had a backup plan." I nodded slowly, feeling my strength and resolve returning with each passing day. They had stolen my house, but they had made a critical error. They had left me with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Over the next few days, a comprehensive strategy took shape. Diane suggested we approach this from multiple angles simultaneously to maximize our chances of success. The stronger our position, the more likely they are to cave without a protracted legal battle, she explained. Our first priority was gathering medical evidence. I signed releases for my hospital records, which documented my condition during the time I had signed the property transfer. Dr. Rivera provided a statement confirming I had been on strong medications that could affect cognitive function and decision-making capacity. Nurse Angela, who had warned me about the paperwork, proved to be an invaluable ally. "I had a feeling something wasn't right," she said when I called to explain the situation. "I've seen this kind of elder exploitation before, unfortunately. I'd be happy to provide a statement about your condition and the circumstances of those document signings." Diane also suggested we collect statements from people who knew my attachment to the house. Thomas, my neighbor, readily agreed. "I've watched you maintain that house with love for 20 years, he said. "Anyone who knows you would find it absurd that you'd give it away while barely conscious in a hospital bed." While the legal case was building, I was also regaining my physical strength. Frank's wife, Barbara, a retired nurse, ensured I took my medications and ate properly. Each day, I felt more like myself, the fog of illness and betrayal lifting as I focused on action rather than despair. "You need to be strong for what's coming," Barbara reminded me as she served another hearty meal, both physically and emotionally. The emotional aspect was perhaps the hardest to manage. In quiet moments, The pain of Jason's betrayal would hit me anew. This wasn't a stranger who had wronged me. This was my son, my only child, the boy I had taught to ride a bike and build a birdhouse, the young man for whom Eleanor and I had sacrificed so much. How could he do this? I asked Frank one evening as we sat on his back deck. Where did I go wrong with him? Frank shook his head slowly. This isn't on you, Grady. Some people just make bad choices, especially when they're influenced by others. He didn't need to specify that the others in this case were Samantha and her parents. Meanwhile, the private investigators' reports revealed interesting developments at my house. Harold and Patricia had fully moved in, claiming the master bedroom that Eleanor and I had shared. They were treating the place as their own, hosting dinners for friends, showing off the property as if they had acquired it through legitimate means. Most concerning were the unauthorized renovations. Leo confirmed that significant electrical and plumbing work was being done without proper permits, likely to convert part of the house into a separate apartment for Harold and Patricia. They're violating at least 6 building codes that I can see just from outside, Leo reported. Not to mention potentially voiding the home insurance with unpermitted structural changes. This information led to another avenue in our strategy: reporting the violations to the county building department. As a former contractor, I knew the inspectors would take unpermitted work seriously, especially in an older home where improper modifications could create safety hazards. By the end of the week, Diane had assembled a comprehensive legal package: medical evidence of my incapacity, witness statements, documentation of the deed's special trust provisions, and evidence of Jason and Samantha's premeditation. She had also prepared legal notices for Jason, Samantha, and her parents, formally challenging the property transfer and demanding immediate cessation of any modifications to the property. We'll deliver these on Monday, Diane said. I've also scheduled a building inspector to visit the property that same day. The timing is intentional. We want to hit them from multiple directions simultaneously. The weekend before our planned action, Thomas called with unexpected information. I thought you should know, he said. Jason and Samantha had a huge argument in the driveway yesterday. I couldn't hear everything, but Samantha was saying something about promises made and how he needed to finish the deal before everything fell apart. What do you think that means? I asked. Not sure, Thomas replied. But afterward, Jason drove off looking pretty upset, and Samantha was on the phone immediately, sounding frantic. This news suggested possible fractures in their united front, perhaps pressure building, as they rushed to complete whatever scheme they had in mind. It confirmed we needed to act quickly. On Sunday evening, I sat with Frank and Barbara, reviewing our plan one final time. The legal notices would be delivered first thing Monday morning. The building inspector was scheduled for 11 a.m. Diane would file our legal challenge with the court by noon, and we had a meeting with a detective from the Elder Abuse Unit of the police department at 2 p.m. Are you ready for this? Frank asked. Tomorrow's going to be intense. I nodded, feeling a calm determination that had been building within me. I've spent my life building things to last, I said. Now I'm going to rebuild my life, starting with getting my home back. That night, as I lay in Frank's guest room, I thought of Eleanor. I wish you were here to help me through this, I whispered to her memory. But I know what you'd say. You'd tell me to stand my ground, to fight for what's right. I could almost hear her response. Show them what you're made of, Grady Thompson. And that's exactly what I intended to do. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, almost as if the universe was acknowledging the importance of the day ahead. I woke early, dressed carefully in clothes Barbara had helped me purchase, and ate a light breakfast despite my churning stomach. You look good, Frank said approvingly. Strong. Our carefully orchestrated plan began at 8:30 a.m. when a courier delivered the legal notices to my house. The private investigator, positioned discreetly across the street, reported that Patricia accepted the documents, her face draining of color as she glanced at the contents. By 9:15, Jason was calling Diane's office in a panic. He's demanding to speak with you, Diane's assistant reported when she called me. He's using quite colorful language. Stick to the plan, I instructed. No direct communication until the building inspector has completed his assessment. At 10:45, Frank drove me to my neighborhood, parking a discreet distance away. We watched as the county building inspector, a no-nonsense woman named Gloria Jenkins, arrived precisely on schedule. I knew Gloria from my contracting days. She was thorough and by the book, with zero tolerance for code violations. Through binoculars we could see the consternation on Harold's face as he tried to prevent Gloria from entering. But building inspectors have significant authority when code violations are reported, and soon she was inside with her clipboard and camera. "How long do these inspections usually take?" Frank asked. "Depends on how many violations she finds," I replied. Given what Leo observed, she could be in there for a while. Indeed, Gloria remained in the house for nearly 2 hours. When she finally emerged, her expression was grim as she made notes on her clipboard. Moments later, she posted a bright orange notice on the front door, a stop work order halting all renovations immediately. "Now it's time," I said to Frank. He nodded and placed a call to Diane, who was waiting at her office. 20 minutes later, her sleek BMW pulled up behind our truck. "The legal challenge has been filed with the court," she reported. "And I've just received a call from Jason's hastily acquired attorney, requesting an urgent meeting." "Perfect," I replied. Just as we anticipated, together, the three of us approached my house. I stood tall despite the lingering weakness from my illness, determined to face this moment with dignity. Frank remained a supportive presence at my side, while Diane projected the confident authority of a seasoned attorney. Patricia answered the door, her previously immaculate makeup now smudged from what appeared to be tears. "They're in the living room," she said quietly, all pretense of ownership suddenly abandoned. The scene inside was one of chaos. Harold was arguing loudly on the phone, presumably with a contractor about the stop work order. Samantha was pacing frantically, while Jason sat with his head in his hands. "Dad," he said, looking up as I entered. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the little boy I had raised, but it quickly vanished behind a mask of defensive anger. "You didn't need to do all this. We could have worked something out. You had your chance to work things out honestly," I replied calmly. "Instead, you chose deception." Diane stepped forward, opening her briefcase. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, I believe you've had time to review the legal notices delivered this morning. Would you like me to summarize the situation for everyone present?" Without waiting for a response, she continued, her voice crisp and authoritative. "We have filed a legal challenge to the property transfer, citing elder abuse, fraud, misrepresentation, and lack of capacity. We have substantial evidence, including medical records, witness statements, and documentation of premeditation." She paused to let this sink in. "Additionally, the building inspector has identified 7 serious code violations in the renovations you've undertaken without permits. The stop work order is just the beginning. There will be significant fines, and any contractors involved may face disciplinary action from the licensing board." Harold finally hung up his phone, his face ashen. "This is absurd. We were just improving the property, without permits, without proper engineering approval, and without ownership rights," Diane countered smoothly. "But perhaps most significantly, you all seem to have overlooked a special provision in the original deed." She removed a document from her briefcase. "This property, upon any attempted unauthorized transfer, reverts to the Eleanor Thompson Trust, with specific provisions for its use and disposal. This clause supersedes any documents Mr. Thompson may have been tricked into signing while incapacitated." Jason stood up, panic evident in his expression. "What are you talking about? What trust?" "The trust your mother and I established years ago," I explained. "The one I tried to tell you about when we did our estate planning, but you said was boring legal stuff you didn't need to understand." Samantha rounded on Jason. "You said there wouldn't be any complications. You promised this would be simple." "I didn't know," Jason protested weakly. "Dad never mentioned any trust. Actually, I did," I corrected, "multiple times. But you weren't listening. You were too focused on getting what you wanted to pay attention to the details. That was always your weakness, son." A heavy silence fell over the room. In that moment, the full impact of what they had attempted and how thoroughly it had backfired seemed to hit them all simultaneously. "What happens now?" Patricia finally asked, her voice small. Diane closed her briefcase with a decisive click. "You have two options. Option 1. You can fight this in court, where you will almost certainly lose, face potential criminal charges for elder abuse and fraud, and be liable for all damages, legal fees, and penalties. Option 2. You vacate this property immediately, return all of Mr. Thompson's possessions in their original condition, and sign a settlement agreement acknowledging the illegality of your actions." "How soon is immediately?" Harold asked weakly. "You have until 5 p.m. today to remove your personal belongings," Diane stated. "A sheriff's deputy will arrive at that time to ensure the property is vacated. Mr. Thompson's possessions are to remain untouched." What followed was a flurry of frantic activity as Samantha's parents began gathering their things. Samantha alternated between helping them and berating Jason for his incompetence. Jason himself seemed shell-shocked, occasionally glancing at me with an unreadable expression. As they worked, I walked slowly through the house, surveying the changes they had made. The sight of half-completed renovations, my belongings carelessly boxed up, and the general disrespect shown to the home I had built with such care was painful. But beneath that pain was the certainty that I was reclaiming what was rightfully mine. True to Diane's word, a sheriff's deputy arrived at 5 p.m. By then, Harold and Patricia had removed most of their belongings, though it was clear from their harried state that they had nowhere prepared to go. "Not our problem," Frank muttered beside me. "They didn't care where you would go when they kicked you out." As the last of their hastily packed boxes was loaded into vehicles, Jason approached me. For a moment, he seemed about to say something meaningful, perhaps even apologize. Instead, he simply said, "I'll send someone for the rest of our stuff later." "No," I replied firmly. "You'll take it all now, or it becomes mine to dispose of as I see fit. And Jason, don't come back here. Not until you're ready to truly make amends, which I suspect won't be any time soon." His face hardened, and without another word, he turned and walked away, following Samantha to their car. I watched my son drive away, feeling a complex mixture of grief for what we had lost and relief that this ordeal was reaching its conclusion. Once they were gone, the house felt eerily empty and violated. Thomas and several other neighbors appeared at the door, having watched the drama unfold throughout the day. "We're here to help you get settled back in, Grady," Thomas said warmly. "Whatever you need." Over the next few days, a remarkable thing happened. Friends, former colleagues, and neighbors formed a volunteer workforce to help restore my home. Leo brought a team to address the botched renovations. Frank organized a group to help clean and rearrange furniture. Barbara coordinated meals and support. As my strength returned, I found myself working alongside them, repairing what had been damaged, reclaiming my space inch by inch. The work was therapeutic, allowing me to process my grief and betrayal through purposeful action. 2 weeks after the confrontation, as we finished reinstalling the kitchen cabinets that had been partially removed, I received an unexpected call. It was from my daughter-in-law, Jessica, Jason's ex-wife, from his first brief marriage. We had maintained a cordial relationship over the years, though distance had made contact infrequent. "I heard what happened, Grady," she said. "It's all over the family grapevine. I'm so sorry Jason did this to you." Her call was followed by others, distant relatives and old friends who had heard about my ordeal and reached out in support. Each connection reminded me that while I had lost my son's presence in my life, I was not alone. Perhaps the most unexpected development came a month later when I received a letter from Jason. It wasn't an apology. He still maintained they had been trying to help me. But there was a hint of recognition that things had gone too far. He enclosed a small box containing a few family photographs he had taken from the house, including one of Eleanor holding him as a baby. I placed the photo on the mantel but did not respond to his letter. Some breaches of trust require more than words to repair, and I wasn't yet ready to open that door. As spring turned to summer, I found myself hosting regular dinners for the friends who had supported me through the crisis. My home once again became a place of warmth and connection, filled with laughter and honest conversation. Frank and Barbara, Thomas and his wife, Leo and his family, they became my chosen family, bound by bonds of loyalty and mutual respect. One evening, as we sat on the back deck watching the sunset, Frank raised his glass in a toast. "To Grady," he said, "who taught us all that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." I smiled, feeling at peace for the first time in months. "And to all of you," I replied, "who reminded me what real family looks like." The road ahead would not be easy. The legal aftermath continued, with Diane pursuing compensation for damages to the property. My relationship with Jason remained in limbo, a wound that might never fully heal, but I had reclaimed not just my home but my sense of self, my dignity, and my belief in justice. As I look back on that difficult chapter now, I realize that what I lost in blood ties, I gained in deeper connections with those who stood by me. I learned that family is defined not by obligation but by respect and love freely given. I discovered strength I didn't know I still possessed, and wisdom I wish I hadn't needed to acquire. To those watching this story unfold, I offer this hard-earned wisdom. Trust should be given carefully but withheld judiciously. Stand firm for what is rightfully yours, but be willing to let go of relationships that cause more pain than joy. And remember that even in our darkest moments, when betrayal cuts deepest, we are rarely as alone as we feel. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? What did you learn from that experience? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Your support helps others find these stories of resilience and justice. Until next time, this is Grady Thompson, reminding you that it's never too late to rebuild what others try to tear down.